Welcome back, my friend. The lamps are lit, the wind has quieted, and somewhere in the shadows the Niffler has found something shiny again. But this time, it's not gold. It's a story, and tonight, he's ready to share it with you. So settle in and listen closely. It begins like this.
The stones of Hogwarts had witnessed countless secrets over the centuries. They had absorbed the echoes of whispered conversations in darkened corridors, the joyous shouts of Quidditch victories, and the hushed murmurs of forbidden magic. Amongst these myriad unseen stories were the persistent whispers of a room that defied the castle's known geography, a place spoken of in hushed tones by nervous first years and dismissed as fanciful rumor by jaded seventh years. It was a room, the whispers claimed, that had once inexplicably closed in on two students, holding them within its walls until they emerged, days later, changed and silent about their ordeal. Maeve Abernathy, a fourth-year Hufflepuff with a sunny disposition and an unwavering belief in fairness, had first heard the whispers from a group of older girls huddled near the kitchens late one evening. They spoke of a hidden chamber, accessible only under peculiar circumstances, a place that tested those who stumbled upon it in ways they couldn't imagine. Maeve, though generally grounded and practical like most Hufflepuffs, possessed a keen curiosity for the unusual, a trait she often kept hidden beneath her cheerful exterior. The idea of a room that could seemingly vanish and reappear, that held some unknown trial within its walls, had lodged itself in a corner of her mind, a tantalizing puzzle waiting to be solved. Elaius Vance, a fifth-year Slytherin with a sharp intellect and a carefully cultivated air of aloofness, had encountered the rumors in a different guise. For him, it was a hushed anecdote shared by a particularly eccentric older student in the Slytherin common room, dismissed with a cynical smirk as typical Hogwarts ghost stories blown out of proportion. Elaius, a pragmatist at heart, usually had little time for fanciful tales. His focus was on academic excellence, Quidditch glory, and navigating the intricate social hierarchy of Slytherin House. Yet, something about the fleeting mention of a room that only opened under specific, almost impossible conditions had snagged his attention. It hinted at a deeper layer of Hogwarts magic, a secret perhaps worth uncovering, if only to understand its workings and perhaps even its potential. Their paths, as often happened between students of different houses with contrasting personalities, had rarely crossed in any significant way. Maeve was usually surrounded by her loyal group of Hufflepuff friends, tending to the greenhouses or diligently working in the library. Elaius moved within the more exclusive circles of Slytherin, often found in deep conversation in the common room or practicing spells with ambitious peers. Their accidental convergence was as improbable as the rumors surrounding the whispered room itself. It happened on a particularly dreary Saturday afternoon. Rain lashed against the castle windows, and the common rooms were crowded and noisy. Maeve, seeking a quiet corner to finally tackle a particularly perplexing transfiguration essay, had wandered up to the 7th floor. She vaguely remembered someone mentioning that a disused tapestry near the tapestry of Barnaby the Barmy sometimes concealed a small alcove. Lost in her thoughts about vanishing charms, she pushed aside the heavy fabric, expecting to find a dusty recess. Instead, her hand met empty air. Confused, she peered behind the tapestry. There was no wall, no alcove, just a seamless expanse of stone where a wall should have been. Frowning, Maeve ran her fingers along the stone, feeling for any hidden seams or levers. Nothing. She was about to dismiss it as a trick of the light and the dreary weather when she noticed something peculiar. Directly in front of the seemingly solid stone, the air shimmered, a faint distortion like heat rising from hot pavement on a summer's day. At the same moment, several corridors away, Elaius, equally intent on escaping the boisterous Slytherin common room, was following a different rumor. He had overheard two third-year Ravenclaws debating the existence of a secret shortcut between the 7th floor and the dungeons, supposedly accessible through a shifting wall, near the tapestry depicting trolls in tutus. Though highly skeptical, Elaius's boredom and intellectual curiosity had led him to investigate. He found the tapestry easily enough. The depiction of trolls in various stages of balletic awkwardness was certainly memorable. He ran his hand over the wall behind it, expecting solid stone. Instead, just like Maeve, he felt a subtle give, a strange yielding sensation in a specific spot. And just like Maeve, he saw a faint shimmer in the air directly before the seemingly impenetrable surface. Drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain, Maeve pushed her hand further into the shimmering air. It felt strange, like pushing through water that wasn't wet. A tingling sensation spread up her arm, and a faint, almost musical hum filled the air around her. Hesitantly, she stepped forward, and the stone seemed to melt away before her, revealing not another corridor, but a space that pulsed with a soft, internal light. Miles away, or so it seemed within the sprawling labyrinth of Hogwarts, Elaius, experiencing the same oddity, made the same impulsive decision. He had always been one to test boundaries, to see what lay beyond the accepted limits. This shimmering wall was an unexpected challenge, an anomaly that his Slytherin mind couldn't resist exploring. He took a breath and stepped through. Neither Maeve nor Elaius saw the other approach. They were each focused on the unexpected passage that had opened before them, the silent invitation into the unknown. They stepped into the room simultaneously from different, unconnected points along the 7th-floor corridor. The room was unlike anything either of them had ever encountered within the familiar walls of Hogwarts. It was circular, with walls that seemed to be formed not of stone, but of a swirling, opalescent material that shifted in color like oil on water. The air hummed with a low, resonant energy, and the only source of light was the walls themselves, which pulsed with an inner luminescence. There were no windows, no discernible doors other than the shimmering entryways they had just passed through. Maeve took a tentative step forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. This was far beyond a dusty alcove. This felt magical, in a way that surpassed ordinary spells and charms. Elaius, ever the more cautious one, scanned the room, his wand already subtly sliding into his hand beneath his robes. He noted the lack of exits, the strange, almost sentient quality of the walls. This wasn't just a secret room. It felt like something else. It was as if the room had been waiting for them. The moment both Maeve and Elaius had fully crossed the threshold, the shimmering entryways behind them flickered and then vanished, the swirling walls seamlessly closing in, leaving no trace of their passage. Panic flared briefly in Maeve's chest, but she fought it down, her Hufflepuff resilience kicking in. There had to be a way out. She turned to where she thought the tapestry should be, but found only the continuous, swirling surface of the wall. Elaius, with a more immediate sense of unease, ran his hand along the wall where he had entered. Solid, opalescent, and utterly unyielding. The air, which had felt subtly inviting moments before, now seemed to press in on them. "Well," Elaius said, his voice betraying a hint of surprise despite his attempts at composure, "this is unexpected." He turned, finally noticing Maeve for the first time. She stood a few feet away, her face a mixture of bewilderment and concern. He recognized her as Abernathy, a Hufflepuff from a year below. Their paths had crossed in potions occasionally, though neither had paid the other much mind. I thought this was just a hidden alcove," Maeve stammered, her gaze darting around the windowless space. The tapestry, it felt like there was something behind it. A shifting wall, according to some rather unreliable Ravenclaws, Elaius replied, his lips curving into a sardonic smile. "It seems we were both lured by rumor." For a moment, an awkward silence hung between them, the only sound the low hum of the room and the soft swirl of its walls. They were an unlikely pair, a Hufflepuff driven by curiosity and a Slytherin led by a thirst for the unusual, now seemingly trapped together in a room that defied explanation. Then, as if in response to their unspoken predicament, the soft, internal light of the room began to dim. The opalescent walls pulsed with a deeper, more ominous hue, and the air grew colder, a subtle shift that sent a shiver down both their spines. The space itself seemed to change. The circular walls began to shift and fold inwards, not physically crushing them, but creating a sense of narrowing, of the room becoming smaller and more confined. The very texture of the walls seemed to alter, the smooth, swirling surface now appearing to ripple and writhe like dark water. Fear, sharp and undeniable, finally gripped Maeve. This was no ordinary magical room. There was something ancient, something powerful, something alive about this place. Elaius, though his expression remained outwardly controlled, felt a knot of apprehension tighten in his stomach. He had encountered dangerous magic before, but this felt different, unpredictable. They were at the mercy of a space that seemed to have its own rules, its own intentions. Then, a new element manifested. Where the swirling walls had been, vague, shadowy shapes began to coalesce, forming indistinct figures that flickered at the edges of their vision. They were not solid, not quite real, but they exuded a palpable sense of unease, of something lurking just beyond the veil of perception. And then a voice, seemingly emanating from the walls themselves, echoed in the confined space. It was not loud, but it resonated with an ancient power, a voice that seemed to speak directly to their minds, bypassing their ears entirely. The room that opens twice does not release its guests until the trials are complete. The voice faded, leaving a heavy silence in its wake, broken only by Maeve's quickened breathing and the almost imperceptible tightening of Elaius's grip on his hidden wand. Trials? Maeve whispered, her eyes wide with fear. What trials? Elaius, his gaze sweeping across the shifting walls and the shadowy figures that danced within them, had a sinking feeling that they were about to find out. This was no mere locked room. They were trapped within a space that was not only magical but actively reactive, a place that would likely probe their deepest fears and test their very limits. And judging by the ominous pronouncement, they would have to face whatever awaited them together. A new sound began to fill the room, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The shadowy figures intensified, swirling and coalescing into more defined forms. And then a section of the wall before them seemed to melt away, revealing not an exit, but a new space, a corridor that stretched into darkness, filled with shifting, indistinct shapes. The labyrinth of shadows awaits. The voice echoed once more, laced with an almost palpable sense of anticipation. Only by trusting the voice you cannot see will you find your way through the first trial. The darkness of the labyrinth beckoned, and Maeve and Elaius, two unlikely companions bound by the magic of a mysterious room, exchanged a look that held a shared understanding of their unexpected and perilous predicament. Their accidental encounter had become something far more significant, a forced partnership in a game whose rules they did not yet understand, but whose stakes felt undeniably high. The vast, circular room dissolved as a section of the opalescent wall before them seemed to melt away, revealing not an exit, but a new space, a corridor that stretched into an oppressive darkness filled with shifting, indistinct shapes. The voice, ancient and resonant, echoed once more. The labyrinth of shadows awaits. Only by trusting the voice you cannot see will you find your way through the first trial. Before Maeve or Elaius could react, the ground beneath their feet seemed to drop away, plunging them into absolute blackness. It wasn't a physical fall, but a disorienting sensation, like being pulled through smoke. When their senses recalibrated, they found themselves standing on separate, narrow paths. The air was thick and cold, smelling faintly of damp earth and something metallic, like old iron. They were separated. Maeve found herself in a winding corridor, its walls invisible in the profound darkness. She reached out, her hand brushing against what felt like smooth, cold stone, but it seemed to recede as she touched it. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her. This was her deepest fear, being lost, alone, unable to find her way. The shadows around her seemed to writhe, twisting into vaguely menacing shapes that hinted at forgotten terrors. She could hear her own heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Just as despair began to settle in, a voice cut through the oppressive silence, startling her. It was Elaius's voice, clear and distinct, yet strangely disembodied, as if he were speaking directly into her mind. "Maeve, can you hear me?" His tone was sharp, tinged with an edge of his usual Slytherin irritation, but also a hint of something else, concern. "Elaius." "Yes. Where are you?" Maeve called out, her voice shaky. She tried to discern the direction of his voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "It doesn't matter where I am. I'm in something similar. A path, but I can't see a thing." The voice said we need to trust the voice we cannot see. That must mean you and me. Elaius's voice was now calmer, more analytical, a reassuring anchor in the darkness. "We need to guide each other. Describe what you're experiencing." Maeve took a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. "It's completely dark. I can feel a path under my feet, narrow. The walls feel like stone, but they're not quite solid. And the shadows, they're moving, like they're trying to scare me." She hated the tremor in her voice, but she couldn't help it. "Shadows. Right," Elaius mused. "My path is similar. Solid but narrow. No obvious threats yet, but I can feel a presence just beyond my sight. The air is heavy here. Listen, if you feel a wall, tell me. If you feel open space, tell me. We'll have to direct each other." "But how?" Maeve stammered. "What if we go the wrong way?" "Then we go the wrong way together," Elaius replied, a hint of grim determination in his tone. "Better than blindly stumbling alone. I'll take point, you provide directions. I'll tell you when I take a step. You tell me what you feel your path doing." This was the core of the trial, trusting the voice, not one's own fear. Maeve, despite her apprehension, knew he was right. Her natural Hufflepuff inclination was to trust, but the immediate, primal fear of the shadows and the unknown made it difficult. Yet, Elaius's steady, logical voice was a lifeline. "Okay," Maeve said, forcing strength into her voice. "Okay, I'm ready." "Good," Elaius responded. "Taking one step forward now." Maeve heard a faint shuffle, a sound that seemed to echo in the vast darkness around her. "I'm still on a straight path," she reported, concentrating. "Same here." "Another step," Elaius said. This continued for several tense moments, their voices their only connection, echoing in the blackness. The shadows around Maeve seemed to press closer, whispering forgotten fears into her mind. The fear of being truly alone, of being judged and found wanting, of never finding her way back home. She fought against them, focusing solely on Elaius's voice. "Okay, my path just turned slightly to the right," Elaius announced. "Mine too," Maeve confirmed, feeling the subtle shift underfoot. "It feels like we're moving together, even though I can't see you." "We are," Elaius stated, a hint of something resembling grim satisfaction in his voice. Another step forward. Suddenly, Maeve's foot met empty space. She gasped, stumbling forward. "Wait! My path ends. There's nothing in front of me." Her voice was laced with terror. "What?" Elaius's voice sharpened. "Mine is still solid." "What do you mean, nothing?" "Just air. A drop," Maeve described, peering into the inky blackness. The shadowy figures around her seemed to coalesce into monstrous, gaping mouths, whispering, "Fall, fall, you're alone." "Don't move," Elaius commanded, his voice firm, cutting through her panic. "I'm checking my surroundings. Can you feel anything to your sides?" Maeve tentatively swept her foot to the left and right. "No, nothing but the narrow path I was on. It just stopped." "All right," Elaius said. His voice was laced with concentration. "I'm going to try something. Stay still. I'm going to take a step sideways, to my left. Tell me if anything changes for you." Maeve held her breath, heart pounding. This was it. A moment of absolute trust under pressure. Her rational mind screamed at her not to rely on a voice in the darkness, especially that of a Slytherin she barely knew. But what choice did she have? The room had forced their hand. She heard a faint shuffling sound from Elaius's side. Then, incredibly, she felt a solid surface slide into place beneath her foot where there had been nothing but air a second ago. It was a narrow, albeit unstable, bridge. "It's here," Maeve exclaimed, relief flooding her. "A bridge. It appeared when you moved." "Logical," Elaius commented, though a faint hint of surprise was detectable in his voice. "It seems our paths are connected. One controls the other. If one of us faces an obstacle, the other's movement or action affects it. We need to work in sync. I need to know your obstacles to make a path for you." "But what if I lead you into a trap?" Maeve asked, a new fear gripping her. "Then we'll face it together," Elaius repeated, his voice resolute. "One step forward onto the bridge, Maeve." Slowly, Maeve took a tentative step onto the newly appeared bridge. It swayed slightly but held. The shadowy figures around her seemed to retreat slightly, their whispers fading. They were still there, preying on her fears, but they were less potent when she wasn't alone. They continued their tortuous journey through the labyrinth. Maeve would stumble upon an illusory wall, and Elaius would have to try different movements to make it disappear for her. Elaius, in turn, would feel his path suddenly narrow or become slick, and Maeve would have to guide him by focusing on her own perception of the labyrinth, feeling for openings or safe passages. There were moments of frustration, moments where fear almost won, but each time, the sound of the other's voice pulled them back. "To your left, Elaius. I see a gap in the shadows that looks like a turn." Maeve called out, her voice becoming more confident. She was starting to see the labyrinth not with her eyes, but with her mind, processing the feedback from her touch and the fleeting glimpses of the shadow movements. "My left. Are you sure?" "It feels like solid rock here," Elaius questioned, but he didn't argue. He listened. Moving left. A soft click echoed, and Elaius's path broadened, allowing him to turn. "Remarkable," he muttered, a genuine note of wonder in his voice. "You're seeing it, aren't you? Not with your eyes." "I think so," Maeve said, a small smile touching her lips despite the darkness. "It's like the shadows tell me." Their shared vulnerability forced a level of cooperation that neither would have expected from the other. Maeve, the Hufflepuff, found herself relying on the logical, albeit terse, instructions of the Slytherin, pushing past her ingrained caution. Elaius, the solitary Slytherin, was forced to trust the intuitive, almost ethereal, senses of a Hufflepuff, relinquishing a degree of control he rarely surrendered. This was true adventure, a crucible forged in darkness, where their very survival depended on a bond built on the flimsy, yet powerful, threads of their disembodied voices. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the air around them began to lighten. The shadowy figures dissolved completely, and the walls of the labyrinth softened, losing their menacing edges. They both felt their individual paths merge into one, wider surface. "I see light," Maeve whispered, her voice filled with relief. "Me too," Elaius responded, a hint of his earlier cynical smirk returning, though it was softened by what they had just endured. "And I suspect our first trial is over." As the light intensified, the labyrinth dissolved, and they found themselves standing side by side in a new, expansive chamber. The walls here were no longer opalescent, but made of polished, dark wood, reflecting the soft, warm glow of magical torches that lined the unseen ceiling. They were still in the room, but it had transformed entirely, shedding its menacing darkness for a new, equally mysterious, but less terrifying guise. The labyrinth of shadows dissolved, and Maeve and Elaius found themselves standing in a new, vast chamber. Its walls, no longer opalescent or dark stone, were fashioned from polished, deep mahogany, reflecting the warm glow of magical torches that lined the unseen ceiling. The air here was still and quiet, carrying a faint scent of old parchment and beeswax. This was clearly another part of the ever-shifting room. Elaius immediately scanned the new surroundings, his hand still resting on his wand. "Well, that was a lesson in cooperation," he remarked, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. Who knew a Hufflepuff could be so intuitive? Maeve, still slightly breathless from the intensity of the shadow maze, offered a weak smile. And who knew a Slytherin could actually trust someone else's senses? Her own fear had receded, replaced by a strange sense of accomplishment and a burgeoning, if reluctant, respect for Elaius. They had survived the first trial, and they had done it together. As they stood, the polished mahogany walls around them began to ripple, not like water, but like thin fabric caught in a breeze. Slowly, images began to coalesce on their surface, forming large, luminous frescoes. These were not generic scenes of Hogwarts, but snapshots from their lives, fleeting glimpses of moments both ordinary and deeply personal. Maeve saw a scene from her childhood, her small self, sitting alone in her garden, whispering secrets to a wilting daisy, trying to heal it with a child's desperate magic. Another showed her receiving a disappointing mark on a transfiguration essay, her shoulders slumped with a rare moment of self-doubt. These were not grand, heroic moments, but quiet, vulnerable ones. Beside her, Elaius watched similar images form on his section of the wall. He saw himself as a younger boy, struggling to cast a basic charm in front of his demanding father, his face tight with a fear of failure. Another image depicted a moment when he had deliberately tripped a smaller first year on the Quidditch pitch, a cold, calculating look in his eyes. The voice of the room, now softer but no less resonant, echoed in their minds. "The walls will reveal fragments of your past. Not the triumphs nor the overt failures, but the moments of unspoken truth, the feelings you kept hidden. To pass this trial, you must share these truths with each other. Tell the unshown truth behind the images. If you lie, or if you refuse, this hall will vanish, and you with it." Maeve felt a wave of apprehension wash over her. Share her deepest, most private moments with Elaius? A Slytherin she barely knew? It felt incredibly exposing. Yet, the voice's warning was clear. The room wasn't just observing them, it was forcing them to confront their inner selves, and to do so in front of each other. Elaius's jaw tightened. He prided himself on his self-control, his carefully constructed persona of indifference. Revealing moments of weakness or vulnerability was anathema to him. He glanced at Maeve, noting the fear in her eyes, the slight tremble of her lower lip. He knew she felt the same. "Right," Elaius said, his voice flat. "Who goes first?" Maeve took a shaky breath. I suppose I will. It's only fair." She turned to the image of herself as a child, hunched over the wilting daisy. This was when I was 7. I loved flowers, and this daisy was dying. I spent hours trying to heal it, trying every little bit of magic I thought I knew, even though I didn't have a wand yet. And I felt so utterly helpless, so small and powerless. I always wanted to fix things, to make things better, but that day I couldn't. It felt like a personal failure even then. She looked at the image of herself with the bad transfiguration mark. And this? I pretended I didn't care, that it was just a silly assignment. But I did care. I worked so hard on it, and when it wasn't good enough, I just felt inadequate. Like I wasn't smart enough, even for a Hufflepuff. She met Elaius's gaze, her expression open, vulnerable. It was hard, exposing these parts of herself, but the room's pressure was immense. Elaius nodded slowly, surprisingly, without a hint of his usual mockery. He looked at the image of his younger self, struggling with the basic charm. This, he began, his voice low, was a charm my father insisted I master by my 6th birthday. A simple floating charm. I just couldn't do it. Not in front of him. He had such high expectations, and I was so desperate to please him. But my hands shook, and the feather just wouldn't lift. I felt utterly pathetic, like I wasn't worthy of the family name, or even of magic itself. I was terrified of his disappointment. He paused, then gestured to the image of him tripping the first year. And this wasn't about Quidditch, not really. It was about making a point. That boy had laughed at me for something trivial earlier that day, something small that no one else would have noticed. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to show him, to show everyone, that I was not to be trifled with. It was about power, my power over someone else. I enjoyed it. His confession hung in the air, cold and stark. Maeve flinched slightly at the raw admission of malice, but she also saw the underlying fear that had driven it. It wasn't just a cruel act. It was a reaction, born from his own feelings of inadequacy. As they spoke, the images on the wall seemed to glow brighter, pulsing with a newfound clarity. The very atmosphere of the room seemed to lighten, no longer pressing down on them. They had spoken their truths, no matter how uncomfortable. The Hall of Truth accepts your offerings. The voice resonated, now with a note of solemn satisfaction. Understanding the hidden currents within yourselves and between each other is the path forward. The glowing images on the walls began to fade, slowly dissolving back into the polished mahogany. The room itself then began to subtly shift. The walls remained solid, but the floor beneath them began to gently undulate, like calm water. The light, which had been warm, now changed to a soft, ethereal glow, as if the room itself was breathing. Maeve felt a strange calm settle over her. The raw honesty had been painful, but it had also been liberating. She felt a connection to Elaius, a strange bond formed from shared vulnerability that transcended their house differences. He had been honest, truly honest, and she appreciated that. Elaius, for his part, felt an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. He had never spoken those things aloud, not to anyone. The act of voicing them, especially to Maeve, had been deeply uncomfortable, yet the room hadn't collapsed. He hadn't been judged, at least not by her. It was a novel sensation, and not entirely unpleasant. The undulation of the floor intensified, growing into a gentle, rhythmic swaying. The entire chamber began to move, as if floating on an unseen current. Then, the walls themselves began to peel away, not dissolving, but sliding apart like giant, slow-moving panels, revealing a new space beyond. A vast, empty chasm seemed to stretch before them, bathed in the ethereal glow of the room. It was not truly empty. Across the chasm, dimly visible through the misty light, was another solid platform, identical to the one they stood on. Between them, however, there was nothing but shimmering, shifting air, giving the terrifying illusion of an infinite drop. Trial 2, the bridge that tilts, the room's voice announced, now imbued with a challenging, almost playful tone. Your path is not yet clear. It must be built by synchronicity. Find your rhythm or fall. The Hall of Truth dissolved, its polished mahogany walls sliding away to reveal a new, daunting challenge. Before Maeve and Elaius stretched a vast, empty chasm, seemingly bottomless, its depths veiled by shimmering, misty light. Across the abyss, dimly visible, was another solid platform, identical to the one they now stood upon. Between them, nothing but shifting, ethereal air, creating the terrifying illusion of an infinite drop. The room's voice, now imbued with a challenging, almost playful tone, resonated in their minds. Trial 2, the bridge that tilts. Your path is not yet clear. It must be built by synchronicity. Find your rhythm or fall. Maeve peered into the swirling depths, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The illusion of a bottomless pit was so convincing that her instincts screamed at her to retreat. A bridge that tilts, she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. How are we supposed to cross that? Elaius, ever the pragmatist, stepped to the very edge of their platform, extending his wand forward cautiously. There's no visible bridge, he observed, his eyes narrowed. Just air. It must be an illusion, but a powerful one. He cast a quick, silent finite incantum, then Revelio, but the shimmering void remained unchanged. Magic isn't dispelling it. This room's enchantments are beyond standard counterspells. As if in answer, a faint, almost invisible pathway began to shimmer into existence directly in front of them, stretching across the chasm. It was incredibly narrow, barely wide enough for one person to stand on comfortably, and it appeared to be made of the same opalescent material as the room's initial walls. But it wasn't solid. It pulsed, subtly flexing and tilting with every shift in the ethereal light. "It's moving," Maeve pointed out, her eyes wide. "It's not just a bridge, it's a tilting bridge." The voice said synchronicity and rhythm. "What does that mean?" Elaius eyed the unstable path with a grim expression. "It means we have to move together, in perfect harmony. One wrong step, and the bridge will likely destabilize completely." He thought for a moment. "My guess is that if one of us steps out of sync, the illusion of the fall becomes real enough to make us fall. But how do we know the right rhythm?" Maeve asked, a frown creasing her brow. "And what if one of us is heavier, or moves faster?" "We'll have to figure it out," Elaius stated, his gaze fixed on the swaying pathway. He turned to Maeve. "We'll go together. I'll take the lead. Match my pace, every step. Don't rush, don't hesitate. Just follow my rhythm. Are you ready?" Maeve swallowed hard. The thought of stepping onto that precarious, shimmering path made her stomach churn. But after the shadow maze, she knew that their only way out was forward and together. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Good," Elaius said, his expression determined. He took a deep breath, then stepped onto the bridge. It swayed precariously, dipping slightly under his weight. "Steady," Maeve called out, her heart in her throat. She placed her foot carefully onto the bridge, mimicking his stance. The bridge dipped under her, but then, surprisingly, began to stabilize. "One step," Elaius announced, taking a slow, measured step forward. Maeve followed, placing her foot down in precise imitation of his movement. The bridge tilted, rocking slightly from side to side. A low, unsettling groan seemed to emanate from the chasm below, an illusory sound that nevertheless sent shivers up her spine. Conflict quickly arose. Elaius, being naturally more athletic and accustomed to swift, decisive movements from Quidditch, unconsciously began to accelerate his pace. Maeve, more deliberate and cautious, struggled to keep up. "Slow down," Maeve gasped, stumbling slightly. The bridge beneath them lurched violently, tilting sharply downwards on Elaius's side. The illusory chasm seemed to rush up towards them, a swirling vortex of nothingness. "Blast it, Maeve, keep up!" Elaius snapped, steadying himself with difficulty. "You're dragging your feet. I can't match your stride if you're sprinting." Maeve retorted, annoyance creeping into her voice. "We have to go together, not just me following you." The bridge tilted further, and the unsettling groan from below intensified. Both of them knew that if they didn't find their synchronicity, the illusion would become their reality. "Right," Elaius gritted out, forcing himself to slow down, to consciously match his steps to hers. He was used to being in control, setting the pace, but this room demanded something different. "My apologies. You're right. We need a common beat. How about we count? On 3 we step. And we don't move until the other is ready." Maeve nodded, relief washing over her. "That's better." "Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, step." Elaius articulated clearly, his voice steady. They took the next step in unison. The bridge still swayed, but it was less violent, more a gentle rock than a dangerous lurch. The groaning from below subsided slightly. This method, a conscious, verbal rhythm, helped them find their footing. They continued, slowly, painstakingly. 1, 2, 3, step. With each successful movement, their confidence grew, and the bridge seemed to respond, feeling incrementally more stable. They learned to anticipate each other's subtle shifts, their bodies unconsciously adjusting to maintain balance. It was a rigorous training in mutual understanding, where failure meant a very convincing, and possibly permanent, fall. There were moments when the bridge would react to a stray thought, a flicker of doubt in one of their minds, causing it to wobble unexpectedly. But now, instead of arguing, they communicated. "Are you thinking about the height?" Maeve asked Elaius calmly, noticing a slight tremor in the bridge that corresponded to his side. Elaius sighed. "Perhaps. It's a long way down, isn't it? Even if it is just an illusion." "Focus on the platform ahead," Maeve advised, her voice gentle. "Imagine it's solid. Imagine we're already there." He took her advice, and the bridge steadied again. In turn, when Maeve felt the cold whisper of her own insecurities, a fear of being tricked or abandoned, Elaius would sense it. "Don't worry, Abernathy," he'd say, his voice firm. "We're not letting go. Not now." His words, though curt, were enough to anchor her, to remind her that she wasn't alone. Their mutual understanding deepened with every synchronized step. They were no longer just two students from rival houses. They were a unit, forced by circumstance to rely on each other in the most fundamental way. They learned to read each other's nonverbal cues, the slight shift in breathing, the almost imperceptible tensing of muscles that preceded a movement. Finally, after what felt like an age, the other platform loomed close, solid and inviting. The shimmering bridge extended to meet it, becoming entirely stable. They took the last step onto firm ground, side by side, both breathing a sigh of profound relief. The chasm behind them vanished, folding back into the shifting, opalescent walls of the room, which had now transformed again. They were in a new chamber, much larger than the previous ones. Its walls were not of wood or illusion, but seemed to be made of pure, pulsating light, gently expanding and contracting around them. The air was warm, almost comforting, filled with a soft, rhythmic sound, like a deep, slow breath. The voice of the room, now soft and almost melodic, echoed in their minds. "You have found your rhythm. You have trusted the invisible. Prepare now for the heart of the chamber." Maeve and Elaius looked at each other, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also with a strange sense of newfound camaraderie. They had faced their fears, exposed their truths, and learned to trust. The room was not finished with them, but they were ready for what came next. The treacherous bridge and the illusory chasm dissolved, giving way to a new, breathtaking space. Maeve and Elaius found themselves in an immense chamber, its walls seemingly woven from pure, pulsating light. The entire room gently expanded and contracted around them, mimicking the slow, steady rhythm of a colossal breath. The air, now warm and comforting, hummed with a soft, resonant thrum, like a deep, powerful heartbeat. The voice of the room, no longer challenging but imbued with a soft, almost melodic quality, resonated in their minds. "You have found your rhythm. You have trusted the invisible. Prepare now for the heart of the chamber." Maeve looked around, her initial awe quickly replaced by a profound sense of peace. The light walls shifted in a gradient of soft pastels, rose, lavender, pale gold, ebbing and flowing with each silent beat. This was unlike anything they had encountered so far, less a trial, more a living, breathing entity. "It's beautiful," she whispered, extending a hand as if to touch the glowing wall. She felt a faint warmth, a gentle pulse against her palm. Elaius, though still cautious, lowered his wand. The menacing edge of the previous trials was gone, replaced by an undeniable sense of calm. He could feel the pervasive rhythm deep within his own chest, synchronizing with the room's slow, steady pulse. "It's reacting to us," he murmured, his voice softer than usual. "To our presence, our emotions." He noticed that when he allowed a flicker of his residual anxiety to surface, the light pulsed slightly faster, a hint of deep blue appearing in the swirling colors. As if confirming his thought, a faint ripple spread across the luminous walls whenever one of them shifted their mood. A sigh from Maeve would cause a gentle golden wave, a tightening of Elaius's jaw, a flicker of cool silver. The room wasn't just observing them, it was directly responding to their inner states, a direct conduit to their emotional landscapes. "It wants us to calm it," Maeve realized, her eyes wide with understanding. "And to calm ourselves. It feels like it's feeling us." Elaius watched the subtle changes. He usually prided himself on controlling his emotions, on maintaining a facade of composure. But here, in this room, every stray thought, every hidden tension, was laid bare, reflected in the shifting hues of their surroundings. This was a challenge of a different kind, one that demanded not physical prowess or sharp intellect, but emotional honesty and vulnerability. "How do we calm a room?" he asked, the pragmatic edge returning to his voice though muted. Maeve closed her eyes, focusing on the rhythmic thrum. "By calming ourselves," she replied, her voice soft, almost meditative. "By letting go of the fear, the doubt. By trusting this." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "It's not trying to hurt us now. It's mirroring us." She began to speak, softly at first, then with more confidence. "It's okay. We're safe here. We made it through the shadows. We crossed the bridge. We're together." She spoke not just to the room, but to Elaius and to herself. With each soothing word, the room's heartbeat seemed to steady, its light deepening into a warm, harmonious golden hue. Elaius found himself, against his every Slytherin instinct, following her lead. He took a deep, controlled breath, focusing on the steady rhythm of the room. He thought of the quiet moments of success on the Quidditch pitch, the satisfaction of a perfectly cast spell, the rare moments of genuine peace he found in the library. He spoke, his voice low, almost a murmur. "We are here. We are safe. The path is clear." The room responded. The golden light intensified, filling the chamber with a profound warmth that was not just sensory, but emotional. The vast space felt less like an intimidating chamber and more like a gentle, protective embrace. The heartbeat deepened, slow and steady, a powerful, reassuring presence. They sat down on the glowing floor, instinctively leaning against one another, finding comfort in their shared presence. The conversation shifted, becoming softer, more personal. Maeve spoke of her hopes after Hogwarts, perhaps working with injured magical creatures, or tending to rare plants in some enchanted garden. Elaius, to his own surprise, found himself sharing a quiet ambition he rarely voiced: to one day work in the Department of Mysteries, not for power, but to understand the very fabric of magic, to unravel its deepest secrets. This was a scene of profound calm and depth. The room didn't demand action, it demanded introspection and connection. It was a pause before the finale, a moment for them to breathe, to reflect on their journey thus far, and to truly see each other not as house rivals, but as fellow travelers stripped bare of their usual defenses by the magic of this unique space. They sat there for a long time, bathed in the gentle, pulsating light, their worries quieted by the room's soothing rhythm. The air felt thick with understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the truths they had shared and the bond they had forged. The room, sensing their newfound harmony, seemed to settle into a state of profound peace, its light radiating a steady, comforting warmth. They had not only calmed the room, they had calmed each other, and in doing so, found a deeper understanding of themselves. The calming embrace of the room with a heartbeat lingered, its warm, pulsating light a testament to the harmony Maeve and Elaius had found. But the peace, they knew, was a temporary reprieve. The voice of the room, now soft and resonant, stirred in their minds once more. "You have faced your shadows. You have found your rhythm. Now the final choice." As the voice spoke, the luminous walls of the chamber began to contract slowly, drawing inward. The gentle, pulsing light intensified, focusing on a single point in the center of the room. From the glowing floor, a slender, crystalline pedestal slowly rose, and atop it, a single, flickering flame appeared. It was not a fire that burned with heat, but one composed of pure, shifting light, dancing with shades of azure, emerald, and amethyst. The room's voice, now solemn, continued, "One of you must remain. The other must step through the light to exit. Only one path is visible." Maeve and Elaius looked at the flame, then at each other. The implication was stark. A choice had to be made. One of them would go, and the other would stay. The path to freedom seemed to be available for only one. The shimmering light of the flame flickered, creating an almost tangible pull towards it. "Only one of us?" Maeve whispered, her earlier peace giving way to a new kind of anxiety. "But we went through this together." Elaius's jaw tightened. This was the classic dilemma, the final test of a shared ordeal. Sacrifice. He thought quickly, pragmatically. He was older, perhaps marginally stronger. "I'll go," he said, his voice firm, stepping towards the flame. "You stay. It's the logical choice." Maeve shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, that's not how Hufflepuffs work, Elaius. We don't leave people behind. Especially not after all of this." She remembered the shadowed maze, the tilting bridge. They had relied on each other completely. To abandon him now felt fundamentally wrong. "I'll stay. You go. You have other ambitions, perhaps. And you don't." Elaius countered, a hint of frustration in his voice. "Don't be foolish, Maeve. This is a magical room. Its logic may be different. One of us is meant to leave." He extended a hand towards the shimmering light. Just as his fingers brushed the edge of the ethereal flame, the room shuddered. The walls pulsed violently, their harmonious colors flashing with discordant reds and sharp blues. The soft heartbeat quickened, becoming erratic, frantic. The flame itself flared, then diminished, shrinking to a tiny, barely visible spark. "The choice is not made lightly," the room's voice boomed, losing its earlier melody, now sharp and accusatory. "Self-interest clouds the path. Sacrifice is not offered, but chosen in unison." Elaius quickly withdrew his hand, his eyes narrowing. "It's a trick," he muttered. "It wants both of us to choose to sacrifice, not for one to simply give way to the other." "But if we both choose to stay, how do we leave?" Maeve questioned, her brow furrowed in thought. "And if we both choose to go, then what?" "It's a paradox," Elaius mused, rubbing his chin. "Unless, the true exit appears only if both choices align in the same direction. a mutual act of self-sacrifice. It wants both of us to be willing to give up our freedom for the other. The flame in the center flickered weakly, almost on the verge of extinguishing. The room's heartbeat was a chaotic flutter now, threatening to overwhelm them. They had to act, and quickly. Maeve looked at Elaius, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. "If we both choose to stay," she began, her voice gaining strength, "then neither of us can leave. But if we both choose to go, but for the other person." "Exactly," Elaius finished, meeting her gaze. A spark of genuine understanding, free from his usual guardedness, flickered between them. "The true exit will appear only if we both genuinely want the other to be free, even at our own expense. It's about selflessness, Maeve." He took a deep breath, then stepped forward, placing his hand firmly on his chest, facing Maeve. "I choose for you to go, Maeve. For you to be free. I will stay." His declaration was clear, unwavering. Maeve felt a surge of emotion. His usual cynicism was gone, replaced by a profound sincerity. She too stepped forward, placing her hand over her heart, looking directly into his eyes. "And I choose for you to go, Elaius. For you to be free. I will stay." Her voice resonated with an equally strong conviction. The moment their words, imbued with genuine sacrifice and trust, echoed through the chamber, something incredible happened. The flickering flame in the center of the room didn't just grow, it exploded outwards in a silent burst of dazzling, pure light. It enveloped them both, warm and gentle, yet blindingly bright. The erratic heartbeat of the room settled, becoming a slow, majestic thrum once more. The chaotic colors on the walls dissolved, replaced by a singular, blinding white. They felt the floor beneath them shift, not violently, but with a sense of purposeful movement, as if carrying them somewhere. The light intensified, becoming absolute, consuming their vision. It felt like being immersed in pure energy, a feeling of weightlessness and boundless possibility. This was the moment of their return, their release. The blinding light faded as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving Maeve and Elaius disoriented for a moment. They felt their feet touch solid, cold stone. The air was cool and still, smelling faintly of dust and old parchment. When their eyes adjusted, they found themselves standing in a familiar, dimly lit corridor on the 7th floor of Hogwarts. The tapestry of Barnaby the Barmy hung on the wall beside them, its faded threads depicting the same familiar scene. The corridor stretched out, quiet and empty, just as it had been when they first stumbled upon the hidden passage. There was no shimmering wall, no hint of a secret entrance, no sign of the vast, pulsating chambers they had just traversed. The stone was solid, ancient, and completely unremarkable. They looked at each other, their faces etched with exhaustion, bewilderment, and a shared, profound understanding. They were back. But the room? "It's gone," Maeve whispered, reaching out to touch the tapestry. "The door, it's not here." Elaius ran his hand along the cold stone where the shimmering wall had been. It was just a wall, nothing more. The voice said, "The door that opens once," he murmured, remembering the ominous prophecy from the room's initial pronouncement. It seems it was literal, for us at least. They stumbled through the deserted corridors, their steps heavy. They passed students, who merely glanced at them, their faces showing no recognition of their ordeal. It was as if no time had passed at all for the rest of Hogwarts, as if their days within the shifting chamber were but a fleeting second in the castle's ancient life. They found their respective common rooms, exhausted but strangely exhilarated. Neither spoke of their experience to anyone. How could they? Who would believe them? A room that changes shape, that tests their fears, that responds to their emotions, a bridge built on trust, a choice of sacrifice. It sounded like a fevered dream. They tried to describe it once. Maeve, in the common room, attempted to explain to a sympathetic Hufflepuff friend that she'd been stuck in a weird, enchanted closet. Her friend merely nodded, assuming she was exaggerating after too much studying. Elaius, with a rare, strained attempt at levity, told a fellow Slytherin that he'd spent the weekend in a rather unconventional detention. His friend scoffed, asking if he'd been making friends with house elves. It was clear. No one believed that it was real. Their ordeal, their journey, the profound changes they had undergone, it was all invisible to the outside world. The room had opened for them, tested them, and then swallowed itself whole, leaving no trace but the indelible marks upon their souls. They were the only witnesses, the only ones who knew what truly lay beyond that shifting wall. The experience was theirs alone. It was a secret bond, forged in a crucible of fear and trust, that no one else could possibly understand. They were forever linked, not by a shared house or common friends, but by the extraordinary, unbelievable hours spent within the room that opens once. A month passed. Life at Hogwarts, in its usual bustling, magical rhythm, continued as if the extraordinary events of that rainy Saturday had never occurred. Maeve threw herself into her studies, helping her Hufflepuff friends with their essays, and tending to the mandrakes in herbology with renewed dedication. Yet there was a subtle shift in her. She was quieter, more observant, and carried herself with an unspoken depth that her friends couldn't quite place. She still believed in fairness and kindness, but her gaze held a sharper edge of resilience, a knowing look that hinted at unseen burdens and triumphs. Elaius, equally, resumed his Slytherin routine with a meticulous precision. He excelled in classes, dominated on the Quidditch pitch, and maintained his usual aloof composure. But his cynicism was less pronounced, his ambition tempered by a new, almost imperceptible understanding of human connection. He found himself, on rare occasions, observing Maeve across the great hall, a flicker of something akin to acknowledgement in his usually impassive eyes. Their paths still rarely intersected, but when they did, a silent, knowing glance would pass between them, a shared secret invisible to everyone else. They were the sole custodians of a truth no one else would accept. The room that opens twice had changed them, binding them in a shared experience that set them apart. It was a weight and a privilege. Then, one crisp autumn morning, a new whisper began to ripple through the castle. It started subtly, a nervous murmur in the common rooms, a hushed conversation in the corridors. "Did you hear? 2 Ravenclaws, they just vanished." In that old corridor on the 7th floor, near the Barmy Barnaby tapestry, the one where those other 2 disappeared years ago, Maeve heard the whispers first in the Hufflepuff common room, a chill running down her spine. The description was too precise, too familiar. The tapestry, the corridor, the unsettling sense of disappearance. At the same time, Elaius overheard it in the Slytherin dungeons. His initial reaction was cynical dismissal, but the details struck him. "Vanished near the Barmy Barnaby tapestry," a younger Slytherin nervously repeated. Elaius's blood ran cold. Their eyes met that afternoon in the bustling entrance hall, amidst the flow of students heading to their next classes. Maeve stood near the grand staircase, her usually cheerful face pale. Elaius leaned against a stone pillar, his usual controlled expression replaced by a rare flicker of raw concern. They walked towards each other, slowly, almost instinctively, cutting through the stream of oblivious students. No words were needed. The realization hung heavy in the air between them, a shared understanding forged in the heart of a transforming room. "2 Ravenclaws?" Maeve whispered, her voice barely audible, as they reached each other. Elaius nodded, his gaze solemn. "Vanished. Just like we did." They stood there for a long moment, the noise of the castle fading into an indistinguishable hum around them. Their secret, once uniquely theirs, was now part of a larger, repeating pattern. The room that opens twice had opened again. It had chosen new occupants, drawn by whispers and curiosity, just as it had drawn them. And it would likely hold them, test them, and change them, just as it had changed Maeve and Elaius. Maeve looked at Elaius, her eyes wide with a mixture of dread and a strange, almost wistful, understanding. He met her gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They were the only ones who knew what awaited those 2 Ravenclaws. The challenges, the fears, the forced revelations, the terrifying choices, and the profound, silent transformation that would follow. "Perhaps," Maeve murmured almost to herself, her eyes holding a distant, knowing look, "we will return there someday, when we are strangers again." Elaius didn't respond with words. He merely offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod. He understood. The room that opens twice was a place that offered not just escape, but revelation. It took those who entered and, through trials and shared vulnerability, remade them. And perhaps, only when the profound bond forged within its walls had faded, when the shared experience had dimmed into distant memory, would they be truly ready to face its challenges once more, to become strangers again, and be reborn by its magic.